You don't have to be the chosen one. The secret is to build the resolve and spirit to enjoy the plateaus. The times when it doesn't feel like you're improving and you question why you're doing this. If you're patient, the plateaus will become springboards.
Get up the floor, 5-on-4 here. Nash lines it up, cracks at it, unable to convert. Nash down the middle, behind the back. Bell is open, and he was great. You get it?
Yes, I get it, Pago.
This is Steve Nash, a 2-time MVP, 8-time All-Star, and widely regarded as one of the greatest point guards in NBA history. But while Nash was the epitome of sportsmanship, some players got under his skin and tested his patience in ways that fans and opponents alike found shocking. So, let's dive into some of the players Steve Nash hated playing against the most and uncover the stories that made these matchups so compelling. But before proceeding, please take a second and hit that subscribe button and like this video. This will mean the world to us. Thanks. Bruce Bowen, the annoying defender. Bowen was a disruptor, someone who mastered the dark arts of defense. Standing at 6'7", he wasn't the biggest or the strongest on the court, but he made himself a nightmare to guard with his relentless effort and physical style of play. His tactics pushed the boundary between acceptable defense and outright dirty play. Small, quick fouls, elbows that barely got noticed, bumping players out of position. His entire defensive strategy was built around making players uncomfortable. And for Nash, who relied heavily on precision and freedom of movement, there were few players who irritated him more. Bowen's road to the NBA hadn't been easy. He wasn't a prized recruit out of high school, nor was he a lottery pick destined for greatness. He went undrafted, bounced around from leagues overseas, and eventually clawed his way into the NBA through sheer determination. That same scrappy energy was what defined him on the court, and he used it to gain an edge against stars like Nash. By the time he reached the San Antonio Spurs, Bowen had carved out a niche as the league's ultimate 3-and-D player, someone who made open threes and hounded the opposing team's best player mercilessly. Their battles peaked during the mid-2000s, a time when Nash's Phoenix Suns and Bowen's San Antonio Spurs found themselves in annual playoff showdowns. The Suns' run-and-gun offense, orchestrated by Nash, was revolutionizing NBA basketball. They played fast, they shot with precision, and his vision made the chaos look like a perfectly choreographed ballet. But the Spurs, under Greg Popovich, were their polar opposites, a grinding defensive juggernaut, with Bowen at the spearhead. Nash, the maestro of the fastest offense in the league, now had to contend with Bowen hounding him on every possession, refusing to give him an inch of space. Bowen used unorthodox and sometimes dangerous tactics to get into Nash's head. One of his most infamous moves, sliding beneath jump shooters just as they landed, could risk serious injury. Nash, a vocal advocate of respect and sportsmanship in the game, was forced to endure Bowen's relentless antics. The tension simmered between them, especially during the heated 2007 playoff series. And in one particular game during the series, the Suns and Spurs were locked in a tight battle. Every possession felt like it could swing the outcome, and as usual, Bowen was tasked with shadowing Nash. A hard foul sent him sprawling onto the hardwood, and though he got back up, the frustration was visible on his face. "Those are the types of plays that don't belong in basketball," Nash said in a sharp post-game comment. Normally even-tempered, Nash rarely called out opponents publicly, but Bowen had pushed him to the edge, and that was his specialty, pushing boundaries, daring opponents to lose their cool, while he maintained his image as a defensive specialist. While Nash kept his composure outwardly, the psychological toll of facing Bowen was undeniable. His approach wasn't just physical, it was mental warfare. He knew Nash's game relied on rhythm and momentum, so his goal was simple: break it. His constant pressure disrupted Nash's tempo, forcing the point guard into rushed decisions and contested shots. Even when Nash managed to put up big numbers, Bowen's mere presence meant the battle within the battle was emotionally exhausting. His smirk after drawing a questionable foul, or his smug demeanor when an official didn't call his antics, only added fuel to the fire. And what made Bowen even more infuriating for his opponents was his off-the-court demeanor. Despite his on-court reputation, Bowen often carried himself as a calm and collected figure outside the game. He spoke of doing whatever it takes to help the team win, and rarely admitted that his actions bordered on dirty play. He leaned into his reputation as the league's premier irritant, but he regularly maintained that his methods were simply a part of smart basketball, an assertion that left players like Nash shaking their heads. He knew exactly what he was doing, Nash said years later, and he did it really well, as much as I hated it. His job was simpler, yet crucial: make life miserable for elite players. And against Nash, he excelled. The Suns often had trouble sustaining their offensive brilliance when Bowen locked his sights on their leader. Every pass, every cut, every shot became harder because Bowen forced Nash to work twice as hard for half the result. Yet, through it all, Nash never resorted to dirty play himself. His sense of sportsmanship remained intact, even as Bowen tried to chip away at his resolve. For all the animosity on the court, there was a grudging respect that emerged in hindsight. Bowen's methods bordered on infuriating, but they worked. He found a way to stick in the league, becoming one of the most feared defenders of his time and helping the Spurs secure 3 championships. And while Bowen's antics left a sour taste for Nash, it's undeniable that their rivalry was part of what defined an era when the graceful Suns faced off against the gritty Spurs. And though it was a battle Nash may not have enjoyed, it was one he'll never forget. But hold on. Everything we have covered about Bruce Bowen wasn't as intense as it was with this player. In fact, without his presence on the court, the Supersonics would have suffered defensively. Gary Payton, the glove who left no room. Known as the glove for his ability to lock down opposing guards, Payton's defensive prowess was matched only by his ability to mentally dismantle opponents with razor-sharp verbal jabs and an unyielding physical presence. For Nash, who thrived on finesse and intelligence, Gary was a storm of chaos, a constant disruption to everything Nash attempted to do on the court. He didn't just guard you, he got inside your head and made you question every move you made. And for a competitor as composed as Nash, that kind of chaos was infuriating. His rise to becoming one of the fiercest competitors in NBA history was built on grit, work ethic, and a fearlessness that was forged long before he stepped onto the professional stage. Coming out of Oakland, California, Gary embraced the swagger of his neighborhood, developing a fiery edge that would eventually define his career. Drafted 2nd overall by the Seattle Supersonics in 1990, Gary needed time to find his footing in the league, but once he did, he became an instant nightmare for opposing guards. His combination of elite defensive instincts, quick hands, and unrelenting trash talk made him not only a menace on the court, but a player who could single-handedly dictate the tempo of a game. For years, Gary relished his role as the NBA's most formidable defensive guard, and when Nash entered the league, it didn't take long for him to become one of his targets. From the moment Nash and Payton faced off, it was an uphill battle for the young Canadian guard. Nash prided himself on his basketball IQ, but so did Payton, and their similarities only made the matchups more intense. Gary wasn't shy about letting Nash know who the alpha was. His trash talk was relentless and personal, designed to unsettle Nash and throw him off his game. Payton was relentless, Nash admitted in an interview years later. He'd get into your body and make every possession feel like a war. It wasn't just the words, though. It was the way Gary backed them up with his smothering defense, forcing Nash to constantly adjust and rethink his moves. He anticipated Nash's passes, contested every shot, and made scoring an exhausting task. Even on nights where Nash was able to shine, he left the court physically and mentally drained, a testament to the effort it took to outlast Gary Payton. Their most memorable clashes came during Payton's prime with the Seattle Supersonics in the late 1990s and early 2000s. He would hound Nash for 48 minutes, barking insults and invading his personal space at every opportunity. For Nash, these battles were often frustrating in ways few other matchups were. He excelled at making everything uncomfortable, shadowing Nash's every move, bumping him on drives, and cutting off his passing lanes with surgical precision. Stats-wise, Bash often struggled to find his rhythm when guarded by Payton, as the glove had an uncanny ability to predict and counter nearly everything Nash did. And yet, what made Payton such a tormentor wasn't just his skill. It was his ability to make players doubt themselves, to second-guess their decisions, and to feel genuinely unwelcome on the court. And off the court, there was a begrudging respect between the two, but on the hardwood, Payton showed no mercy. Nash once joked about how Payton's trash talk was exhausting just to listen to, but deep down, he knew it wasn't just talk. It was psychological warfare, and Payton was one of the best to ever do it. Even late in his career, as his physical abilities began to decline, Payton continued to lean on his mental edge to outwit opponents, ensuring that players like Nash never truly had an easy time when matched up against him. And what stood out most about their encounters was how personal they felt. Payton didn't treat Nash like just another player. He treated him like a challenge, someone who needed to be broken down piece by piece. And for Nash, whose game was built on precision and beauty, facing Payton felt like trying to paint a masterpiece in the middle of a hurricane. As much as their matchups were defined by tension, Nash never shied away from admitting how difficult it was to go against Payton. He wasn't just guarding you, he was in every part of the game, Nash said in an interview. He made it hard to get comfortable, and once he got in your head, it was over. For all the frustration and exhaustion their battles brought, Nash admired Payton's intensity and his commitment to winning, qualities Nash himself prided in his own game. But that admiration didn't make their matchups any easier. Even as Nash grew into a two-time MVP and one of the most celebrated playmakers in NBA history, the memories of Payton hounding him and making every dribble a chore remained vivid. In the end, their battles told a story of contrast, and no matter how different they were, they pushed each other to new heights, leaving a legacy of fierce competition that fans still marvel at to this day. Now, we move on to one of the best shooting guard of his era. In fact, if it wasn't for him, the Lakers wouldn't have won a title. Kobe Bryant, the relentless competitor. Kobe was an obsessive perfectionist, someone who played the game of basketball like his entire legacy depended on every possession. And for Nash, whose calm and calculated demeanor defined his style, facing Kobe meant stepping into the vortex of a storm. The mid-2000s became their battlefield, with Kobe's Lakers and Nash's Suns regularly clashing in emotional, high-stakes games that tested the limits of both stars. It was the classic contrast, his finesse versus Kobe's force. Beneath it all, though, was an underlying tension, a sharp edge to their rivalry that was as personal as it was professional. Kobe entered the league as a high school prodigy, bursting onto the scene with raw talent and a confidence rarely seen in an 18-year-old. His career wasn't handed to him on a silver platter, though. He had to earn everything by clawing his way to the top, fighting through early struggles of limited playing time, public criticism, and even clashes with his own teammates. But this fight only sharpened the edges of an already unyielding personality. It wasn't long before he transformed into a terror on the court, a player whose name struck fear into defenders and rivals alike. For Nash, who entered the league as an underrated, overlooked guard from Canada, their trajectories couldn't have been more different. And yet, by the 2000s, their paths began to collide under the bright lights of playoff basketball, where their diverging philosophies clashed in ways that elevated both men. Their matchup reached legendary status in the 2006 playoffs, a series that remains etched in NBA history as one of the most intense and dramatic duels between two superstars. It was Nash's MVP-winning Suns, known for their lightning-fast offense, going head-to-head with Kobe's Lakers, who relied on his otherworldly scoring to survive. The emotions were high, and nothing felt predictable. Kobe carried his team on his back, single-handedly keeping the Lakers alive with iconic performances like his 50-point explosion in Game 6. Kobe didn't just want to win. He wanted to crush anyone in his path, and Nash was his primary target. For Nash and the Suns, every possession felt like a ticking time bomb when Kobe had the ball, his ability to will his way into taking over games hanging like a shadow over their strategies. But it wasn't just Kobe's scoring that rattled Nash. It was the way Kobe's unshakable confidences seemed to feed into the intensity of those games. He wasn't afraid to trash talk, to stare down his defender, to smirk after sinking back, breaking shots. Everything he did on the court was designed to get into the heads of his opponents, and Nash, ever the composed and sportsmanlike competitor, had no choice but to confront Kobe's relentless mentality head-on. He could take over at any moment, Nash would later admit, acknowledging the chaos Kobe brought to those games. And yet, for all of his brilliance in that 2006 series, Nash's Suns emerged victorious in 7 grueling games. It was a testament to Nash's resilience, but the intensity and frustration of facing Kobe left its mark. And throughout their careers, the two men shared a complicated relationship rooted in mutual respect, but carried a palpable tension. Nash, who preferred to allow his performance to speak for itself, was always struck by Kobe's unapologetically confrontational approach to the game. And for Kobe, who thrived on challenge and intensity, Nash embodied the kind of opponent who made him dig even deeper into his vast well of mental toughness. Their battles weren't just about stats or winning. They were psychological trials, tests of whose resolve could endure the longest. For Nash, playing against Kobe was like standing across from someone who would exploit every weakness, both physical and mental, to break you down. Kobe didn't just want to beat you. He wanted you to know you had been beaten. Even outside of their playoff wars, the regular season matchups carried their own weight. There were games where Kobe would erupt for 40 or 50 points, unstoppable no matter how well Nash orchestrated his team. And by the time Nash joined the Lakers late in his career, injuries and time had dulled the sharp competitive edge that had once defined their battles. But even then, the shadow of what they had shared on opposite sides of the court remained. Kobe's relentless pursuit of greatness had pushed Nash in ways even the Canadian star didn't fully appreciate until after their careers wound down. Their story wasn't one of friendship or camaraderie. Kobe didn't believe in letting competitors get too close. It was a story of a rivalry that pushed both men to their limits, a reminder that greatness is often forged in the fires of the fiercest competition. James Harden, the modern nemesis. When James Harden entered the league in 2009, he wasn't the player we know today. Drafted third overall by the Oklahoma City Thunder, Harden was a promising prospect, a left-handed shooting guard with a silky smooth jumper and a knack for getting to the basket. Nobody predicted he would one day become one of the most dominant offensive players in NBA history. But Harden's rise wasn't without controversy. By the time he truly became a star, he had transformed his game in a way that a purist like Nash couldn't fully embrace. While Harden shattered records and refined the art of scoring, Nash viewed his methods, particularly his reliance on drawing fouls, as a stark contrast to his idea of how the game should be played. Their matchups weren't about head-to-head competition in the traditional sense. Harden entered his prime after Nash was on the decline. But their philosophies on basketball created an unspoken tension that made every meeting between their teams a story in itself. And by the time he found his footing with the Houston Rockets, Harden had crafted a game that was as effective as it was divisive. His signature move, the step-back three-pointer, became unstoppable, and his ability to bait defenders into fouling him turned into a vital tool for padding his scoring output. For Nash, it was almost sacrilegious. "I guess some guys just get all the calls," Nash once said with a hint of sarcasm after watching Harden run up his free throw tally in yet another game. It wasn't just the free throws that annoyed Nash. It was the way Harden turned foul baiting into an art form, one that often disrupted the natural flow of the game. Their encounters became more frequent during his rise in Houston, especially when Nash was winding down his career with the Los Angeles Lakers. Harden was ascending to superstardom, racking up MVP-level stats and redefining isolation basketball, while Nash tried to make the most of his final years battling injuries. When their teams met, Nash couldn't help but show visible frustration on the court. His strategy wasn't just effective, it was disruptive. The way he used his strength to barrel toward the basket and forcing defenders into awkward positions felt almost unfair to a player like Nash, who prided himself on clean play and brilliant passing. Harden's unique ability to manipulate the game stood in direct contrast to Nash's unspoken philosophy that the beauty of basketball lay in teamwork, movement, and grace. To Nash, his game was calculated chaos, and he didn't hide his irritation. Harden, for his part, didn't see the issue. To him, basketball was a game of adjustments, and exploiting the rules was a skill like any other. "I just play to win," Harden explained in an interview when asked about his reliance on free throws. But for Nash, it wasn't that simple. Watching Harden operate often felt like watching someone exploit a loophole rather than embrace the artistry of the game. It wasn't personal. Nash respected his talent, but their differing approaches to basketball created a rift that would never fully close. And despite this, their matchups were always compelling. Harden's scoring prowess and Nash's legendary playmaking created a fascinating stylistic clash, even if it wasn't always an even fight. Harden often dominated the stat sheet, dropping 30, 40, or even 50 points, while Nash tried to counter with crisp ball movement and smart decision-making. But Harden's relentlessness wore down opponents, including Nash. The constant fouls, the isolation plays, the stepbacks, it all felt like a departure from the game Nash loved, and it showed in his demeanor. On more than one occasion, Nash was seen shaking his head in disbelief after a whistle sent Harden back to the free throw line, and off the court, they never engaged in public feuds. Nash, ever the diplomat, avoided directly criticizing Harden's game, though his body language during their matchups often painted a different picture. Harden, meanwhile, was too focused on his mission to dominate and secure a legacy of his own to worry about what veterans like Nash thought of his playstyle. But there was an undeniable contrast that made their interactions fascinating. Harden was ushering in a new era of basketball, one built on analytics, three-point volume, and free throws, while Nash represented a bygone era where teamwork and fluidity reigned supreme. In many ways, their clashes symbolized the evolution, and in Nash's eyes, the corrosion of the modern game. For Nash, basketball will always carry the weight of its past, and that weight made it hard to fully embrace a player like James Harden, Rajon Rondo, the feisty technician. If Nash was the serene conductor of his team's beautiful, fast-paced offense, Rondo was the feisty disruptor who thrived on creating chaos. He was calculating, unpredictable, and willing to exploit any weakness. He was the perfect counterpoint, a defender whose sole purpose was to throw everything off balance. Their matchups would become a chess match played out on the hardwood, where Rondo's defense and playmaking often left Nash visibly frustrated. His rise to prominence wasn't typical of most NBA stars. Drafted 21st overall in 2006, he wasn't initially seen as a franchise cornerstone. However, upon joining the Boston Celtics and being surrounded by veterans like Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen, he quickly emerged as the team's floor general. And what separated him from the pack was his cerebral approach to the game. From the beginning, it was clear he was a savant. He could predict plays, read passing lanes, and make decisions faster than most. It wasn't long before he garnered a reputation as one of the sharpest defensive minds in the league. For someone like Nash, who prided himself on outsmarting defenders and elevating those around him, Rondo was an uncomfortable matchup. Not because of brute strength or speed, but because of how Rondo could anticipate Nash's every move as if he were one step ahead. Their battles were particularly heated during Rondo's time with the Celtics, when Boston was at the height of its powers as a top contender in the Eastern Conference, and Nash was leading one of the most electrifying offenses the NBA had ever seen in Phoenix. Nash and the Suns thrived on their trademark 7 seconds or less offense, a lightning-fast system where decisions and movements had to happen in the blink of an eye. It was a system that left most defenses scrambling. But not Rondo, where other defenders would bite on Nash's fakes or give him space to thread impossible passes. Rondo made it his mission to read and disrupt. He thrived in these moments, using his length and quick hands to poke the ball loose or intercept a cross-court pass, often turning defense into immediate offense for his team. And for a player as skilled and composed as Nash, his ability to constantly meddle with plays created a level of frustration that few others could. And what made Rondo so unique in Nash's eyes was how he mirrored some of his own strengths. In an interview, Nash described Rondo as a mirror. He'd figure out what you were doing and hit you right back. Rondo wasn't afraid to challenge Nash in ways that other guards wouldn't, whether it was forcing Nash out of his comfort zones or daring him to take low-percentage shots. He always seemed to have a trick up his sleeve. And it wasn't just on defense. As a playmaker, Rondo was ferocious, constantly hunting for openings and orchestrating the Celtics offense with the same flair for precision that made Nash a 2-time MVP. It was as if Nash was watching a younger, edgier, more aggressive version of himself at times, but one with a completely opposing manner on the court. And while his game was all about poise and grace, Rondo's style was scrappy and confrontational. He was unafraid to get into it with opponents, and even though their rivalry wasn't steeped in personal animosity, his competitive fire often brought out rare flashes of irritation from Nash. Rondo was known for his intensity, and that intensity was matched by his unmatched determination to win, no matter the cost. It was that same determination that made him a nightmare to go against, and one of the few players capable of disrupting even a seasoned, all-time great like Nash. Rondo could speed the game up, slow it down, make an unexpected play, or force Nash into uncomfortable decisions. There were moments when Nash, visibly exasperated, would try to regain control, only for Rondo to throw another wrench into the Suns' offense with a crucial steal, deflected pass, or well-timed double team. Though their rivalry wasn't as personal or bitter as some of the others Nash had faced, Rondo's ability to mentally and physically challenge Nash made their matchups unforgettable. Nash admitted in interviews that it was a genuine challenge going against Rondo night after night, knowing how the Celtics guard would study his tendencies and look for an edge. Rondo had a unique way of pushing Nash to his limits, not through brute force, but through his ability to outthink almost anyone on the court. And this made every game against Rondo a battle of wills, one that often left Nash mentally drained. The rivalry may not have carried the same personal animosity as others, but it was every bit as intense, a battle of basketball IQs that exemplified the beauty and difficulty of the game at its highest level. Joakim Noah, the defensive pest. Noah thrived on the dirty work many players shied away from, tipping loose balls, swatting shots, diving for rebounds, and doing all the little things that disrupted even the most seasoned opponents. For a player like Nash, Noah embodied everything that could go wrong on a basketball court, and he wasn't just disruptive with his physical presence. He didn't just defend, he tormented. He didn't just guard the paint, he got under your skin. Nash entered every game against Noah, knowing it wasn't going to be a tactical duel or a chess match. It was going to be exhausting. It wasn't a direct positional matchup. Nash as the floor general and Noah as a center rarely faced each other head on, but his presence radiated across the court. His relentless energy disrupted patterns. For Nash, who valued rhythm and flow more than anything else, playing against Noah was like trying to execute a symphony while someone banged pots and pans in the background. And if that weren't enough, Noah brought a brand of trolling that was uniquely his own. He would talk trash constantly, lob taunts, even when he had no business doing so, and smirk after big plays as if daring Nash to respond. He doesn't stop talking, and on top of that, he never stops moving, Nash once said about Noah. It's exhausting. For Nash, who preferred to let his game do the talking, this kind of non-stop agitation was infuriating and impossible to ignore. But Noah didn't get to this point by accident. Before he became the pest that dominated the NBA, his early basketball journey was anything but smooth. The son of French tennis legend Joakim Noah, he didn't take a traditional path to stardom. Spending part of his childhood in Paris, basketball was never a natural fit for him at first. His style was unconventional, and his wiry frame seemed out of place in a sport dominated by giants with polished skill sets. However, what Noah lacked in grace, he more than made up for with sheer effort and heart. At the University of Florida, Noah blossomed into a star, leading the Gators to back-to-back NCAA championships in 2006 and 2007. It was at Florida where Noah's energy and passion erupted onto the national scene. He was never the most skilled player on the court, but he outworked everyone. And when he entered the NBA as the 9th overall pick in 2007, selected by the Chicago Bulls, he vowed to bring that same energy to every game. And it didn't take long for him to establish a reputation as one of the league's most relentless defenders. He was never the biggest or the strongest center, but he had an uncanny ability to disrupt plays, get in the heads of his opponents, and play with a motor that never seemed to run out of fuel. And against Nash, who was in the latter half of his career by the time Noah entered the league, it often felt like the younger player's energy was specifically engineered to mess with Nash's carefully choreographed game. But what truly made him a thorn in Nash's side wasn't just his defensive prowess. It was his emotional impact on the game. Noah wore his heart on his sleeve, screaming after every block and yelling encouragement to himself and his teammates. It was passion bordering on chaos, and for a player like Nash, who preferred control and quiet efficiency, it was maddening. And one of their most memorable encounters came during Noah's peak years in Chicago. Nash, still running the offense with remarkable precision despite his advancing age, faced the Bulls in a tense matchup that showcased the stark contrast between their styles. Nash's Suns, known for their pace and space offense, relied on him to set the tempo and create scoring opportunities. But Noah had other plans. He chased Nash relentlessly, closed passing lanes with his long arms, and constantly rotated to the ball, disrupting the very flow Nash needed to succeed. At one point, after being fouled hard on a drive to the basket, Nash got up and exchanged words with Noah. It wasn't the kind of heated argument fans had come to expect in other rivalries, but for Nash to even verbally engage showed just how frustrating Noah could be. But Noah wasn't all talk and chaos. He backed it up with an elite ability to defend and rebound, often finishing games with eye-popping hustle stats that couldn't fully capture his impact on the court. While Nash always respected the game and the players who excelled at it, there was something about Noah's unorthodox style that rubbed him the wrong way. Maybe it was the constant motion, maybe it was the non-stop trash talk, or maybe it was the sheer rawness of his game. And whatever the reason, he brought out visible frustration in one of the league's calmest and most composed players. And while Nash usually found a way to solve even the toughest defensive challenges, playing against Noah meant navigating a brand of chaos for which there was no clear solution. Even after Nash retired, Noah's reputation as one of the league's most relentless, passionate pests remained firmly intact. And in the end, his battles with Noah were a testament to the intense mental and emotional challenges of competing against someone who made chaos his calling card. Naam. These players brought different challenges to him, pushing him mentally and physically in ways few others could. While their styles and tactics often created tension, Nash's ability to stay composed and rise above the rivalries cemented his legacy as one of the greatest point guards to ever play the game. All right, that's all for today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.